impacts them. So we have a group of experts today and practitioners to discuss how we can capture this, how we can capture our impact on and how we can influence SDGs. And I will introduce them shortly, but before that, if you could go back to the earlier slides, on the rules of the meeting. So we will have about 90 minutes for this for the webinar, plus approximately half an hour for the discussion. As you have already noticed, we switched on recording. It's important for us that we capture the content of this meeting. It is also a requirement of the donor, and that is the European Commission. We encourage all of you to ask questions. Please do that absolutely throughout the whole of the webinar, from the moment zero all the way to the end. And you can, the best way to do it is to use the chat functions, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, but feel also free to interrupt. We welcome this. If you have questions, you can just make yourself visible and ask your questions. And finally, we'll share all of the presentation afterwards. So, yeah, you'll get all of them. We have, as I mentioned, we have experts today with Agents for Impact, and I have an incredible pleasure to introduce Manuela Fritsch, who has been since 2020 with Agents for Impact, but before, actually, she worked a lot in development. She, as you can see from her bio, she worked for the World Vision. She also worked for KfW, and she has a double degree in international business studies from the Hochschule für Technik und Wirtschaft from Dresden, and Hochschule. I'm not sure if my German is correct, Manuela. Maybe you can help.
It's perfect.
It's perfect. Good. And we also have with us Andri Tetsun, who is founder and CEO of Agents for Impact. And I should have mentioned that Manuela is Director of ESG Risks and Impact at Agents for Impact. And Andri also has a lot of experience both in development and commerce. So you can see that he worked in collaboration with KfW and the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management in promoting SME finance and microfinance, but he started his career in private banking, and he worked for BHF Bank in Frankfurt. So that's for Agents for Impact experts. We also have practitioners here who will actually share how can capture, measure, how we can do the complete first steps, and then carry on, how to establish impact monitoring and management systems in microfinance institutions. And for that, we have with us today Maria Deutschu. Maybe we can move to the next slide, who is Chancellor of the Romanian Microfinance Association. You probably all know Maria has a lot of experience in the region in microfinance. She used to work for a project for remote rural areas in Central Asia, in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. But also Maria has a lot of knowledge and experience in EU. She served as a board member of European Microfinance Network. She knows the sector inside out. And we also have a small change today. For personal reasons, Stefan Bucic, who is the CEO of BCR Social Finance, cannot attend today's webinar. And we have with us Laura David, who is head of business development and product management also at BCR Social Finance. Laura, would you like to add something, since we do not have any bio of yours here because of this last minute change? Would you like to maybe add any detail?
Well, nothing. Thank you. Thank you, Gregor. I've been working with microfinance for the last 23, 24 years, such a long, looks like a long time. And I've been working with BCR Social Finance for the last 14 years since inception. I've been involved in the implementation of code of good conduct in with BCR Social Finance and all the projects that hopefully create impact for our clients and the community they are active in. And this is something, this is all from my side for from now. Thank you.
Super. So we have a real microfinance expert here, experts actually. Okay, let's move to the next slide. So just a reminder that we are also getting ready to the MFC conference, which will take place on 24th and 25th May. It will be our silver jubilee, actually, 25 years. I'm sure many of you, not most of you, have already signed up. If not, please feel free to do that. Today is the last day of the early bird registration. We have a very exciting agenda that we have put together and many events that will celebrate our anniversary. Next slide, please. So I already mentioned that this webinar is part of the SIFTA program. Here I have a duty actually to repeat what you may have already heard many times, but SIFTA is a program that has been designed by the European Commission. It's part of this new investment program that is called InvestEU and is a continuation of the so-called Juncker's plan that you may be familiar with. This it's a huge investment program that has been put together after the COVID pandemic or even during it, just to give a reboost to the EU economy. This program has an advisory hub, and SIFTA is actually part of that. It provides technical assistance to microfinance institutions and to institutions that provide financial services to financial services to social enterprises. Let's move to the next slide. So you actually, many of your institutions may have already benefited of the SIFTA predecessor, and that is EASY, and the program that was called EASY. It consisted of this program consisted of targeted capacity building, of a program of study visits, but also there is a component that helps institutions in compliance with the Code of Good Conduct. So if you would like to assess your systems before applying, before being certified, you can also do that for free within this program. It's also important to mention that this program has a rating and assessment part, which is accomplished by Microfinance rating, while the advisory part has been delivered by a consortium that is that consists of the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management, Microfinance Center, and European Microfinance Network. For those of you who are outside of the EU, the tough news is that this edition, that SIFTA covers only in EU countries, but the good news is that the JINEA actually has been developing a program outside of EU that would also support technical assistance to MFIs. For the moment, the target area is the Balkans, and there will be many announcements about this program at the MFC conference, but perhaps in the future it will be expanded also to other areas. I think, yes, there's more information available through social inclusive finance technical assistance, and that is SIFTA website. You can also, it's very simple to apply for this technical assistance. I hope I mentioned that it's free of charge, so I kind of take it for granted that everyone understands this, that you don't have to pay for this program. It's very easy to apply. You just need to send an initial email to the email address that we are showing on the screen, and you will get a response with an application form, which is also not very tough given some of the EU bureaucratic procedures. It's actually even simpler if you are a provider of finance to social enterprises. So, for instance, a social enterprise incubator or fund that would like to receive technical assistance from SIFTA, it's the requirements are even simpler. So please feel free to use this opportunity. It will not last forever. There is a budget for 4 years, and you can apply anytime. If you haven't used yet SIFTA or its predecessor, Easy Technical Assistance, then you will have to go through rating assessment with Microfinance. If you have done this already, then it's going to be even simpler. We can directly get to you and discuss your needs and design a program that would fit you. You will get 15 days of targeted of a targeted technical assistance program, or we can also discuss with you a program of visit, of study visit, of peer-to-peer visit, where you can find out about how an institution of a similar type works and functions in a different country. So I think this is it for me. So it has been a little bit longish. I have a pleasure now to pass mic to Manuela from Agents for Impact.
Yes, thank you very much for the nice invitation and introduction. And while I'm sharing the presentation, I'm really happy to be here again, also to see some new and some familiar faces. And I would definitely like to encourage you also to use the chat if you haven't changed your name yet. So please do so, or also maybe write us a short message where you come from. This is just really nice to also get to know you. And I would really like to also recall that this is like the second webinar in the series on the SDGs. And we called it How to Start, because we at Agents for Impact, we have been working with the SDGs for quite some time now. And it's really interesting to also see that still there's a lot of people and a lot of also actors in our sector who are not yet familiar with the SDGs, and that's not a problem, but we really would like also to use this webinar to really show one of the most crucial and also one of the most difficult steps in the journey. It's actually the first start. And so how to start implementing the SDGs, this is actually our topic. And I'm glad it's been mentioned again, this is your webinar, and it's also open to people from other regions. So please do ask your questions, because this will not only make it more interactive, it's also really your opportunity and your chance to make the best out of it. And if you want us to drop an email, if you have an interest in some of the other issues and also questions that we are addressing and that might not be answered during the webinar, please do write us an email, use the chat function, and we will really try to answer also the remaining questions that might also go a little bit out of scope from the webinar this time. Great, so let's look at the agenda. And today we would really like to give a short introduction again, also on the SDGs, and also still a little bit on the context that we're in. So that means also on the regulation that's taking place, especially here in the EU, and also on some of the evolving market standards that we are seeing, because in the field of impact measurement and management, a lot is really underway at the moment. And As a starting point, we will also share a practical example. And here I'm really glad to have very experienced actors from the field, from the Romanian Microfinance Association, Maria, and also BCR Social Finance. So we will really share also very practical inputs from that. And the main part of the presentation will really be on how to start implementing the SDGs and really going from the first steps, looking at the pathways to the SDGs to really understand how impact really happens, and also how you can take your existing measurement frameworks, your goals. So it's really an important message also of this webinar to say, you do not have to reinvent the wheel when you start implementing the SDGs. You really have to see what you do already, the goals you have, and also what you measure already on how to align this and how to find ways to really do this also in respect to the SDGs that are actually a harmonized framework. And we will also have a chapter which will touch one of the most important questions, and this is how to find the right metrics and also indicators. And usually it all boils down to this. So how do we actually measure it? And we will really also look at some very specific examples for that. So we will have a little break from time to time to really look at your questions. So please do use the chat. And now I'm really happy to hand over to Andre and to really explain a little bit the SDGs. What is it about and actually what makes them special?
Thank you, Manuela, for introduction. As a founder of Agents for Impact, I would love also to add that SDG from beginning are very important for us. We decided in 2018 to allocate 50% of our resources, of our human capacity. At that time, it was 2 persons who were dedicated to in order to elaborate SDGs, to prepare something comparable with SDG rating, to create rating which can assess how the institution aligned to sustainable development goals. And what is sustainable development goals? Sustainable development goals, if you go to the next slide, you will see that it's something happened in 2015. It was actually Millennium Development Goals, which were started in 2000s, and they developed last 14 years, and we have only 8 goals. And then in 2015, all governments who are presented in United Nations signed the agreement that they accepted all these 17 goals. And what is unique with these 17 sustainable development goals is that we are talking about private sector as well. So private sector also agreed to fulfill, to align their developments to the 17 SDG goals. So it's unique that we have a combination of the private and public sector here with the clear definitions what we are willing to reach. Because 17 goals, it looks like very clear, like no poverty, but we have 169 targets. It means that almost 10 targets per goal, which is qualified what should be done, how to measure. And they're talking about 1,500 indicators which should be measured. It's part of the quantitative and qualitative. So it's on the first look, it looks like it's very simple, only 17 goals on the high national level. But if you go to details, it's more sophisticated as it is. Thank you. And if you go to the next slide, because we started from the Millennium Goals, Millennium Development Goals, 2000 to SDGs, but in our financial sector, because we are talking about now about microfinance and in Europe, European Union, and each in financial sector, in financial inclusion, and not only, but also in asset management, in banking. My career started in the banking. We all know and talking about ESG, environment, social governance. And for me, this slide is a good combination where we can show that it's actually the same cake. It's like how we can interpret ESG, which is given by each own house, by each own asset manager, what is environment, what is social, what is governance. It's not something which is standardized, but it's up to you about your approach, and we are transformed to as SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, where everything is very standardized, is very classified and straightforward, given on the high national level. And for me, it's a nice cake where we can see implementation of different types of ESG in SDG. So it's again, there is no cut between one sector to another. It's again through developments and different aspects. Thank you, Manuela.
So Andrei, if I could interrupt, so what you're saying basically is to not to be afraid of ESG, because this framework kind of directly relates to ESGs.
Very good question. Exactly, Gregor.
And by actually localizing, so by making SDGs kind of particular, specific to your environment and to the environment of your work, of your community, etc., etc.
Very good question, because it's exactly my point to say that it's not like a cut and no connection between ESG, which is very old, and now we will discuss it further in this presentation, SFDR regulation, and one of the funds or industry, microfinance funds, they trying to say we are in line with SFDR regulation, Article 9, and claims themselves as Article 9, based on ESG criteria, environment, social governance. And it's one of the answer to this question. But other answer to this question is that if you look on ESG, we will find the reflection of ESG questions in SDGs, and we can derive from this 169 targets or more than 1,500 indicators the questions which is related to ESG questions, and it's also sorry for giving too much at the beginning, and we will go through the presentation, but in our tool, in this SDG rating tool, our rating, we also derive from the SDG questions, which is very straightforward and given. We derive from them the answer to the question of ESG. So it's again to show that there is no such cut between ESG topic and SDG. No, we see transformation and connection, and we can derive the answer to some question in SDGs to show how the institution looks like in terms of ESG. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thanks.
Please, Manuel.
Thank you. And the reason why we also like this picture is because if you think only in concepts, then sometimes there seems to be a strict separation between is it ESG or is it SDG? But if we look into our world, into our daily work, we see that dealing with environmental, social, and governance aspects, often we look at the same issues. So if we sometimes look at a particular aspect, like when we look at the SDG 12, what is responsible consumption or responsible, let's say, production, we see it entails environmental and social aspects. And this is the particular strength of the SDG, so that we look that those issues are integrated. But at the same time, if we look at it, we can also say, we can also boil it down one SDG and can say, for example, for responsible consumption or production, this really contains environmental aspects like resource consumption, climate change, and emissions, waste. This is environmental subjects, but also on decent jobs and also on some of the aspects that are rather social. So what we want to express it doesn't always have to be a contradiction. It's something that how we approach it and about the concept and the mindset that we use. And it's really important to see that now that more and more investors and also private organizations use the SDGs, that if we look at all of them, not all of the SDGs are really covered. So based on a recent OECD report, which was published in this year, we also see that if we look at the SDG focus of mobilized private finance between 2018-20, we definitely see that some of the SDGs are targeted much more than the others. And so this is on the one hand good news, but it's also bad news, because for example, for me as a former project manager for health and education, like SDG number 4, quality education, or also like health and well-being, this is something that's not yet addressed at a broad scale, at least not in the scale of typical, but it can also help you to really look inside. So what's the interest of the investors? What is actually the themes and the topics and also the SDGs where the money is flowing into, and what are actually the topics that are of interest and that are also aligned to the goals and also to the investment strategies of the investors and also of the organizations themselves. And we will also touch on some of those SDGs to really look at how this can be specifically done. But definitely we see that some of the big topics nowadays of the great, let's say in the green transformation, on combating climate change, really dealing with clean and affordable energy, which is SDG 13 and 7. This is something that's also seen in the amount of finance that's flowing into those subjects. And also for our sector, it's important to see that we cannot really contribute to all the SDGs at the same time, but we can also choose to focus on where our main impact topics are, and then we can also prioritize and highlight and see and demonstrate where the main impact is, which is actually also according to our mission, and also which is the impact that's also relevant and reasonable to also say that we really can contribute to that impact from our sector and not only carry, let's say, the heavy burden of really targeting all of them at the same time, which is definitely not the case. But it will be interesting to see, because maybe let's have a little poll, and if you choose in your control sheet, you will also see a little survey now. So there are maybe several SDGs that you know best and that you already measure or maybe even report to. So it would be nice to let us know which are the top 3 SDGs that you already know best, and also which you might also already deal with. So please take a few seconds to okay, only like a third of the people, so I give a little bit of more time for it. Okay, if you haven't answered yet, maybe just try it. But there's also a second part to the question. Okay, what we can see is definitely that also like SDG number 1, or also zero hunger, education, clean water and sanitation, and also affordable energy. This is really something that is also really, really in the focus of our sector. Thanks a lot for all who were answering. Let's also do the second part of the question with the other SDGs. So if we can start that poll as well. So also from the other part. So maybe you can also see if you choose some of, yes, those. Okay, if we look at the examples, definitely responsible consumption, SDG 12 is also some which is really in the highlight, and also partnership for the goals. That's really interesting. And life below water. This is an SDG that's not so often targeted. So it's an interesting group here, and it's really nice to see that also other SDGs are covered. Thanks a lot. And since we see that nowadays more and more organizations really use the SDGs also in their impact framework, because they are one of the universal standards and actually like a language that's also spoken across the world and not only in specific regions, or also for a certain type of, let's say, sector, which really chooses some of the topics that are more relevant to them than for others. We also see a second development that's taking place, especially in Europe, but not only there. And this is really the trend on regulation and also on increasing standards in the market for impact investments. And In the last webinar, we dealt with this topic a little bit more in detail. This is why I would only like to give you a little overview. And if you need more information or also some more details, we'll send around this presentation, and you can also find some more references in the appendix. But also if you go back to the last webinar and would like to see it themselves. But the question is really, how does regulation actually impact the social and the impact investors, and also the investees and the companies that are actually there, let's say investor companies. And what we see is, especially at the European level, that the sustainable finance disclosure regulation has actually really increased the level of transparency, but also the level of detail and the level of work that's really flowing into everything that an investor has to publish now and also has to disclose in terms of the impact they're making, and also on the claims and the impacts they are suggesting that they are going to promote. And although the regulations are different for the financial sector, and also now with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, where the standards and the reporting standards are being developed at the moment. So this is really something that really raises also the expectations in the market and also of the regulator on how to report and how to disclose environmental, social, and governance factors, and also the impact. So it's important to see that on the one hand, the regulations might be different, but of course they impact one and the other. So for example, if your investor needs to disclose more information and more specific information, of course this will also affect you as an investee, because they will also need information from you. And what does this exactly mean also for the investors, or also what is the type of information that's actually requested? So we see that there are hardly any exceptions. So most of the asset and portfolio managers and investors, they are subject to that regulation. And inside all the details and the different parts of the regulation, and it's what we call the delegated acts and the annexes to it, we see that especially for the investors that are actual impact investors, the disclosures and the details and the obligations are actually the highest. And so, especially if it comes to the SDGs and the frameworks we use on how to report on impact, we see that there need to be much more details and much more indicators and much more information that investors need to disclose on what is actually the investment objective that I have, and what are the methodologies, the indicators, the sources of data that I use to measure this. And it's really important to say that since more and more investors are really using the SDGs and are applying them, the level of detail that is required, also driven by regulation, this has also shaped a little bit more the ways on how we approach now the SDGs. So it's not enough to only show an icon and to really make a link that the topic is a similar one that I'm addressing. It's really also about talking about indicators, about really establishing a link on what I do, what I achieve, and how this relates to the investment objective that I have. And it's also worth mentioning that not only we look at the positive impact that we make, so looking at the SDGs and we want to contribute to a better world, and we single out specific topics where we say this is our objective to make a significant impact in this world. It's also about looking at the negative impacts, and here the regulation is also quite clear on really defining what principal adverse impacts are and how they are going to be disclosed by the investors. And of course, also the risks are an important issue. So sustainability risks are also going to be reported on in the way on how they are integrated, for example, in the investment process and also along the whole process. Since I will not go into more detail on the regulation alone, I can really encourage you to either check it out in the appendix, but also if you have organizations you work with or lenders or investors, maybe check it out on their websites, because the good thing now is that they have to disclose. And since this regulation came in effect and enforced last year already, so from this year on, you will really see that all the major asset managers, the lenders, investors, they will have to provide that information. And so it's really worth checking this out and also seeing on how they apply the methodologies and also how they measure the objectives they have, also in terms of the SDGs. So that's really one of the main outcomes of this regulation, that it really brings more transparency, and that you can also look at some of the different approaches that the investors and also the organizations might have who also use the SDGs.
Manuela, if I could
Yes.
interrupt, this legislation
Sure.
is EU-based, right? This is EU
Yes.
regulation. Do you have any information about other countries? Do they follow suit? You know, countries outside of Europe, how do they relate to that? With regards to investments, of course, the majority of investors are actually registered in the EU countries, but there might be cases actually where they are not. Would they still follow this regulation? Yeah.
Actually, the thing is also, if a fund is registered on one of the EU markets, yeah, this SFDR applies. So it's also having some, let's say, spillover effects. But at the same time, we also see that also other countries and also other regions have really seen a rise in sustainability related regulation. For example, in Asia or also in the UK in the last year, there has been a first proposal of, for example, what we call the anti-impact washing regulations, and really increasing the transparency in the first place, but also it's about the quality of information, and it's about starting, if you claim you want to promote impact, please say what you do and also do what you say. Yeah, I mean, this is how we can summarize it. I think it's one of the, let's say, the EU has raised the bar the highest, but a lot of other, let's say, regions and also countries have really, let's say, come up with different, but also with very similar, let's say, approaches. And also, I've not talked about the taxonomy, you know, and other parts of the regulation. So it's really important to see that regulation on environmental, social, and government topics is increasing. And this is like also a global phenomenon, which really raises the bar very high in terms of the expectations also in the field of impact measurement.
Super, thanks.
Just to add, and this it's a good bridge to the next slide. That I visited AFI forum once a month in Bangkok, and we discuss.
Excuse me, Anthony, maybe you could explain what AFI is. Not everyone may be familiar with AFI.
Yeah. So AFI Forum is Asian Forum, Asian Financial Institution Forum in Bangkok. It's like the same idea with MFC conference in which will take place this time 25th anniversary in Montenegro. So it's the same idea, but for Asian market, for Southeast Asia, because we are talking about India, which is now the leader in terms of population, 1.1 billion, 380 million, even bigger population in terms of as China, for example. And of course, microfinance is very represented in this region. And this AFI forum was to discuss about the same topics as we have we'll have discussed in Montenegro. And this question, Gregor, was also asked what kind of taxonomy or in terms of reporting on impact, the measurement of impact is requested by the regulator in Asia. And for just to give you the answer, what is happening in this region, then, for example, in India, first 1,000 listed companies should report on their environment, social governance criteria. In Philippines, for example, green bonds is priority number one. It's required from the regulator to be active with this product. In Singapore, we see the same kind of regulation as we have taxonomy in Europe. So my point is to say that it's not something unique which is coming here in Europe, but it's actually a global trend. And maybe it's also because this SDGs goals, sustainable development goals, are again global language for all regions. regions, and we should achieve them all 17 until 2013. And we see a lot of regulation which is coming also in all markets and all regions, and not only in Europe, with like EU taxonomy, SFDR requirements. And that's why I would love also to say here the slide, and thanks again for the question, Gregor, that operating principle for impact management, which were introduced by actually IFC, and later on taken by GIN, Global Impact Investing Network. And that's why I think it makes sense to speak more about common principles. We see here like 5 main goals, like strategical intent, where we should define strategic impact objective consistent with the investment strategy. It's like bread and butter as of today for impact funds. Then organization and structuring. What does it mean? It means establishing the manager's contribution to the achievements of impact. And it's again, it's a global. It's not like given, and this answer should be given by each asset manager how to achieve this impact. And Manuela mentioned this. It's not more like not to do harm, but to do real impact. On the portfolio management level, we see monitor the progress of each investments in achieving impact against expectation and respond appropriately. And again, impact at exit. It means conduct exits considering the effect on sustained impact. And again, each house has its own definition what is impact. In our definition in Agents for Impact, as we also advisor to the fund, to the biggest in Germany, which is around 1 billion euro, we do SDG rating assessment at the beginning of the investments, at the beginning of doing due diligence, and then at the end of the money provided and the money paid back to the fund. And for us, the difference in between the ratings, SDG ratings, is impact. And of course, its impact could be different. It could be negative, it could be positive, but it's a difference. And here I would love also to say some words about impact management platform, which actually combine such big names like IFC, who introduced operating principle for impact management, GIN, Global Impact Network, JRR, UNDP, OECD. It's a platform for collaboration, and they, as a result of this, they presented 5 impact dimensions. And here I would love to say some words about these 5 impact dimensions. Firstly, the question, what is the goal? What are my goals? Which result do I expect from, and how important is this to the people I want to serve? The second question would be, who is affected? Who are the target groups affected, and how underserved are they really? Because we would love to reach underserved population, and exactly we see it in SDG goals. The next question is, how much change is happening? How much is the change in the target groups? Because typically, if you're talking about microfinance, our target groups are women. What is the contribution? What would have occurred anyway without us? And what can we say is actually our contribution? And the last is about the risk, because what kind of risks? The result will be different than intended or expected. And now if you go to the next slide, if Manuela will allow me, then of course, if you're talking about SDGs, there are a lot of standard guidance, and I would love to bring you some of them which exist on the market, because again, we are talking about different markets and about different players on the market, and definitely it's each of them requires its unique approach. And for example, I would love to pick up some of them. For example, this document on SDG impact and standards is actually more related for bonds, enterprises, and private equity funds. Yeah, if you look on on this UNDP impact standards for financial sustainable development, it provides a framework for donors and development finance institutions to make financial decisions and manage projects in the way that generate a positive impact on sustainable developments and improve the transparency of development results. If you look on this SDG recommendations, it's developed actually through consultations with accounting and financial professionals, which idea was to provide answer to the society, to the civil society participants, what kind of impact we can reach in order to report on the key reporting framework. Yeah, so maybe Manuel can add more on this 5 standards or 5 documents which we pick up for this webinar, but to give you impression that you are not alone, and you should look more more concrete what kind of investors you are covering and what kind of requests do they have from these investors. Thank you.
It's true, and in a nutshell also to say, so you see that as a conclusion that it's not only the regulation, it's also that more and more standards and good market practice and also on how we approach impact measurement in order to hold ourselves accountable and also to really develop professional standards. This is evolving, and it's also important because it's really also important to distinguish ourselves of impact washing and about really depicting it only too easily. Yeah, but I think now it's really time to also see how this really works in practice. And here I would really like to also hand over to Maria, because in Romania there was a very interesting event also last year where you really tried also to work with the MFIs to really prepare them a little bit for the upcoming ESG regulation, but also you try to strengthen some of the impact measurement practices and also to share the best practices also with the SDGs. So thanks a lot, Maria, and I'm really looking forward, and also thank you in advance for sharing your experience, how you did it in Romania, and also reporting a little bit on the event.
Thank you. Thank you, Manuela. So I will skip the presentation of myself. Just one single remark. Since the beginning of this year, I'm working as a counselor from the Romanian Microfinance Association, supporting the board of the Romanian Association to implement the activity plan for 2022. So organizing event, summarizing, participating to working groups on behalf of the association or conferences or events. I will start my presentation from my the last phrase the speaker before me was.
If you allow me, Maria, to interrupt, if there's any way you can do the slideshow mode, something we. Oh, exactly. That's super. Yeah? Thanks. Okay. Thanks for that. Better now. Yeah. Thank you.
From my colleague, which was introducing the impact measurement and management before that, you are not alone. So starting from this, I will share with you some of the activities and initiatives of the Romanian Microfinance Association to support its members in this journey, which doesn't seem that easy. Like you know, just take the indicators you have, put them on the website of your or report them to your investors, and that it is. The impact is there, the measurement is there, the reporting is there, and the management is there. So let's look a little bit of the initiative of the Romanian Microfinance Association. With financial and technical assistance support from SIFTA, we organized a workshop on evaluation and reporting of the social and economic inclusion of the microcredit beneficiaries. And this workshop was aiming to assist the Romanian microfinance institutions to organize during the compliance process of the new legislation on impact and environmental, social, and development goals, measuring and reporting, and to comply with a new legislation which was passed through the European Parliament Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which actually will be enforced in the local legislation, and the microfinance institutions should report on ECG, environmental, social, and governance in 2027 for 2026. So there are just few years until all those indicators should be embedded in the management information system of the MFIs in Europe. And 2006 will be the first year where these reports will be available. The second objective of the workshop was support for the Romanian MFIs to identify the relevant key performance indicators, to start thinking about data collection, impact measuring, and reporting. And the third one is the dissemination of the best practice from the Romanian microfinance sector on impact measurement and reporting. So the reason we organized this workshop in December was awareness to the sector about what is coming, yeah. But in the same time, to identify if there are already experiences in Romania, if there are already microfinance institutions which, at the request of their investors or at the request of their board, are already collecting, reporting, measuring, and managing those key performance indicators of their microfinance institution. So another initiative of the Romanian microfinance institution is to support the management of those indicators. I will talk more later when I will present one of the case studies from a Romanian fintech. This is the benchmarking report for 2021. So you have to be aware the Romanian microfinance institutions is doing each year an exercise to collect the main key performance indicators of the sector in Romania, and in order to have benchmarks of the Romanian microfinance sectors as to be able for each MFIs to compare with the benchmark of the Romanian microfinance sector, which has let's say some particularities, you know, a legal framework which is well established, long time established, the type of microfinance institutions which are both commercial entities registered as a non-bank financial institutions, but as association like the credit unions. And another particularity is that the Romanian microfinance institutions represent 38%, if I'm not mistaken, based on the last report, of all the MFIs which are certified as compliance with the European Code of Good Conduct. So those are the particularities, and we are among the Romanian microfinance sector. It's among the main beneficiaries of easy technical assistance and easy financial instruments. So these reports are not only tools to promote the sector, but are management tools for the MFIs to assess and compare their performance with the key performance indicators of the sector in Romania. So according to the code, the European participants to this workshop are already aware about what the European Code of Good Conduct for microcredit provision is. But in the fourth chapter, where there are the main key performance indicators of the microfinance institutions are mentioned, and there are reporting financial, social, and a pool of those indicators have to be reported, has to be presented to the communities they serve and reported to their investors. We select a few, for 2021, we select few indicators, which are the main relevant indicators for the Romanian microfinance institutions, relevant for the MFIs in Romania, MFIs missions in Romania. And you can see female clients, rural clients, startup clients, the operational sustainability, which is a key indicator, the number of employees. So those are some of the indicators, plus all the other financial indicators and risk indicators, like portfolio at risk. But this was 2021. In April 2020, so this month, the new tool to collect data contained 17 impact indicators related to 7 Sustainable Development Goals and EU code. So you can see which are the main indicators which are considered relevant for the MFI's mission and are included in the tool we collect the data and process the data. Of course,
Maria, if I could interrupt, how did you come to selecting these particular SDG indicators and impact indicators? Was it also a group exercise, or was it?
Yes, it was a workshop from December. Mm-hmm. So okay. we got together, and you can see we were working really hard. It was presentation and working groups in order to determine which are the most relevant for the MFI's mission.
Super.
And we come up with these indicators, which
and how does it relate to the regulation that will be applicable to all of you in the future? Is there a link already to the ESG regulation framework for Romania, the one that you mentioned?
Well, the European Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive.
Mm-hmm.
This directive was passed to the European Parliament, I think in December or November, December. So it is not yet included in the Romanian legislation. It has to be translated into the Romanian legislation. We already have the large companies which are reporting, but since 2026, the medium company and the small companies will report. The only one exception are the micro companies. So we are waiting. This is a type of preparatory phase. We are waiting for this directive to be included in the Romanian reporting system, and those indicators will be reported together with the financial reports, which are standardized in Romania, and posted on the website of the Ministry of Finance. But we are waiting for this, and this is another goal of the Romanian Association, to be part. We already have contacts at the Ministry of Finance to be part of this working group, which will actually translate the European legislation into the Romanian legislation, reporting legislation, and to include the relevant indicators for the Romanian MFIs.
Okay, thank you for these clarifications.
Good. What I would like to share with you, it's an example for one of the Romanian fintech. For the Romanian fintechs, I think for all the fintechs, what it's easier somehow, and less time and costly to include in their platforms the automatic calculation of those key performance indicators. But what we did is to structure somehow, and you can see on my slides the social goal who, the social development goals which are attached, the objective, capacity to monitor the client characteristic relevant to the MFI's mission. Yeah? And you can see the indicators, the values, how they were calculated, and what is really important, the benchmarks. So in order to have such a report, yes, Grzegorz.
No, just a quick one. This particular fintech considers itself a microfinance institutions, right?
Yes.
Maybe you can say a few things, you know, what sort of a product they have and whom they target. I think that would be of interest to all of us.
Yes, it's a fintech which is right now developing, besides the factoring services, the micro credit products. It's the microcredit product was already launched. They are targeting the micro and small enterprises. And they are on the Romanian market since 2017, 18 actually. They were registered in, so they are pretty new. And you can see from the indicator, the average loan amount is 1,700 euros. So the ticket is very small because they are targeting the structure of the client. It's 56 micro, 40 small, and only 4 medium companies. Yeah. So what it's and those are, you can see the social goal 2, capacity to monitor and measure the quality of the service providers, and the third, it's capacity to monitor the impact. And I put here the on the slide you have on the left part, you have the sustainable development goals, which are some relevant for these indicators. But I will go to measurement. Yeah. So the role of the association, and again I will stress the fact that you are not alone here, is to support, not only to select, at least to document and to select the key performance indicators which are relevant to your mission, but to guide the executives and the boards to establish relevant benchmarks. And this can be done as we are doing, establishing, connecting the indicators which are calculated for each microfinance institutions with the benchmarks of the sector, if there are this type of research or reports available. You can benchmark them, your performance indicators, with European sectors. And by the way, MFC and IMM did a good job with report on the microfinance sector in Europe. The last one was really, really helpful and allowed us as a sector to compare our performance indicators, the Romanian performance indicators of the sector, with the sectors in different other countries. or you can use the benchmarks which are available worldwide. Important is to establish targets, benchmarks which are relevant, indicators which are relevant, and be consistent. So it's not an easy journey from my point of view, and I see how many efforts are done by the MFIs to start collecting data, to start adding to their MIS these new capacities. For fintechs, it's easier. Yeah, they are using a lot of databases. They can calculate, like one of the most difficult indicators is to assess how much the turnover of the company increased. So for the fintechs, it's easy because they are extracting automatically the data from the main public databases. In our case, it's the Ministry of Finance, and they can calculate it automatically. For an MFIs which are not using this public database automatically, they have to do it somehow by hand or asking for more information from their client. And this is one thing the MFIs will avoid, to burden their clients with a lot of reporting. Give me that, I need you, those information related to the increase in turnover, the increase in assets, the increase, the number of jobs created and maintained. All those kind of information can be extracted from, at least in Romania, from the public databases. And if you have a platform, this can be done automatically. If you not, you have to add it to your microfinance sector or use surveys. But here I think Laura, my colleague from BCR Social Finance, will show their way of collecting data and reporting on the main impact indicators. So that's the presentation I prepare for today. Good luck, and I wish you success. And this should be a warning for all, in my opinion, for all the country associations. Yeah, they have to follow somehow our example and MFC and IMM examples, and look to these subjects very with a great attention, and start based on the current, assessing the current situation of the microfinance institutions in your country, develop activities, workshops, awareness, support for the MFIs to comply with European legislation or with the demands of their investors, because that's another trigger. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Maria. And indeed, this sounds like an incredibly important new role for country level associations, not only to prepare MFI, but to work with them jointly on identifying the right benchmarks, the right indicators, the right benchmarks, preparing for the legislative changes, maybe even influencing them beforehand.
Yes, and I think we should get together with the Pan-European Association and work on the European Code of Good Conduct as well. To include the key within the chapter 4 of the code, to include indicators which are relevant.
Yes, and thanks also, Maria, because it also shows that there are already sector approaches and also approaches that have been taken by an association. And what you started from is not developing something from scratch, because you looked at the existing regulation, you looked at what that the MFIs already have to report, and now you linked it to regulation, which is being developed at the moment, but still you also linked it to the SDGs. And I think this is also a very important message that we wanted to say. So this is is really something where you can also try to get help. Yeah. So getting back also to our, let's say, next, slide is, if you maybe do not have yet an initiative of your sector, so how can you start actually implementing the SDGs? And I think this is also something which is really important, but which echoes the message that we had before. If you start, do not start somewhere from your own. It is a process, and you can also start simple, but others have gone the same way before you. And for example, we told before that we as Agents for Impact, we have a rating tool which is based on the SDGs and which was developed in 2018. And for example, we followed one of the leading initiatives in the business sector, which was come up with by the World Business Council on Sustainable Development and the UN Global Compact, which was called the SDG Compass. And those were business indicators. So really fit, not for the public sector, but for the private sector. And those indicators were really drawn up in alignment with other existing reporting frameworks. So not creating new indicators, but taking the ones that had been established before and really being aligned to the SDGs. And what did the SDG Compass say on how you should start really integrating and implementing the SDGs? Really start understanding the SDGs and define your priorities. You do not have to measure all of them. Start with some. Start with the ones that really match your goals, or start also with the ones where you see that they are also aligned to the mission you have and to some of the data that you are either required already by regulation or by local maybe associations to report on, but also the ones that really fit your mission. And if you do that and really start understanding the priorities, which is also, and that's why I put it here, in line with the principles from the impact management platform in terms of the what and the who and the how much. Yeah, so really understanding the SDGs and also understanding what you already do. And how did it really look in practice? So if you, for example, really take a detailed look at the SDGs, yeah, and for example, SDG number 1, you will see that financial inclusion and microfinance is already mentioned in some of the targets. So giving access and increasing access to financial services, also including microfinance, this is already covered in some of the SDGs and in the sub-targets that are actually defined. So it's an important encouragement also for you to really deal a little bit further with the SDGs and see that there's really also an overlap and also some of the goals that are actually maybe also your social goals. Yeah. Also the same applies, for example, if you look at the concrete name of the goal. So usually with the small icons, we just summarize it, but to promote sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth with full and productive employment and decent work for all. So if you read that, you might see that this actually also coincides with some of the goals that you will follow. So have a look in the concrete targets that have been defined and really start from there, because targets and indicators, they are already defined. And for example, that's what we also did with our own tool. And back in 2018, there was much less in terms of resources, guidance, help, and also awareness in the market. So we really designed a questionnaire and looked what are the most relevant SDGs for us in the microfinance sector that we wanted to specifically target. And we really designed this tool to really assess also how aligned are our investees to the SDGs that are really at the core of how we want to promote impact. And we chose SDG 1, 5, 8, and 16. And as we already said, we also tried, when we do a report and when we do the rating, to really explain well to our investees, what do the SDGs mean? How do we measure it? We also provide you with the indicators reviews, and also we do it in a text and in the meaning, and we really try to communicate it in the report also on how this relates to the SDG, because, sorry, to the E and S and the G, because we say it's not a contradiction. In order to understand it, you really also can do it in different breakdowns. And if we can talk about the subject on how do you deal with client protection, those are social topics. So we can also say, how does that relate to gender equality, to promoting decent jobs, anti-discrimination? So if we talk about an issue, we can also explain how it relates to the specific SDG, but also how it relates to ESG. And this is really important to say that if we look at the categories on staff-related aspects, rights protection, client-related aspects. So if we really, let's say, do this as a holistic approach in a rating and also in our approach, it will really also help understand how the SDG can be linked to the aspects, so that you really understand what's measured, but also that you see that it's not a contradiction to use different types of concepts to maybe also explain and understand an issue. And it's really also important to say that it's not only a social rating or an ESG credit rating, it's really aligned to the SDGs. This is how we started. But again, we really looked at a few highly relevant SDGs, and also there are other ones which we call medium relevant. So we measure all the SDGs, but we really picked out the ones that we focus on. And I would really say this is also a very good start that you can also do. And
maybe Manuela, before back to the slides before, just as I think it was remember this question from Greg regarding link between SDG and SG, and it's I refer to my answer. It will be presented later on in the presentation, and you can see here that is here connection between SDG, environment, social, and governance. And the next step I would love also to mention, as we are talking about the rating, we can see is definitely here. It's we define what is sustainable and what is not sustainable, and if it's more than 43%, so again, it's a number, it's a quantitative number, more than 43%, then it's sustainable according to our approach. And back to the Maria is also, I really appreciate Maria on-ground tool and on-ground answer to the question, what is impact? And of course, it's each defined by its own, as still we don't have like taxonomy on this, or definition or regulation on this, but what is good here that in our approach we say that it's the beginning. If institution is not sustainable, it means less than 43%, we don't proceed with the advisory. We will not advise this institution to the fund, and it will not be eligible for us. So it's just like practical points on this tool. Thank you, Manuel. And if you go to the next slide, and here's a theory of change, this and go to the next step, to the next slide. You see that the main approach as of today is not like only from doing less harm, but achieving real life impact. Yeah, because previously, we have in all loan agreements where we providing the funding to the microfinance institution, we have exclusion list. Please don't do this harm activities, yeah, because we are you will be not eligible, and we are not providing funding for you. But it's like less harm, doing less harm. But we should nowadays approach, we should do real change, long-term change in terms of impact. And of course, as always talking about this topic impact, we collected here some definitions of the impact from big names of the industry. Like Gene Global Impact Investing Network, what is definition about impact from them? It's investments made with intention to generate positive, because it could be negative, you do remember it, measurable social and environmental impact alongside a financial return. Yeah, so it should be sustainable in sense of financial return. It's not a charity to do the better life as a church. It's a great job, but we as investors are looking for a financial return to them. Yeah, and it's important to mention here. The next from impact management platform, which I explained you some slides before, initiated by IFC, the definition from them 2021, a change in aspect of a people's well-being or the condition of the natural environmental caused by organization, positive or negative, intended or unintended. So it's more broader, you see, so it's not like only for investors to invest and to simplify what is your definition, what you're looking for, but it's more broader because we are talking about impact management platform where OECD is involved, UNDP, IFC, it's public and private sector. You see the difference in definition immediately. And the last from CGAP, I think the most oldest one, well-being, the change generated by financial service provider in the lives of its clients with regard to resilience and opportunities. So it's again something applicable, yeah. And now I would love to go to the next slide where you can see this theory of change. You know, it looks like a big scientific definition, but at the end of the day, it's really simple. Firstly, let's take an example of microfinance. Input activities. What do we do and what do we promote? It means we do microfinance, we provide funding to, we do financial inclusions, yeah? And what kind of output of this? Of course, what are the results of our activities and what we are doing? It means we are providing funding, we give the loans to our clients. So it's like microfinance, but the outcome, what is more interesting is to know what kind of changes. So it's not only like provide the funding, but we create new opportunities, we are creating a positive impact on society, we are creating new jobs like SDG number 8 or SDG number 1, no poverty, creating make inaccessible, not bankable, yeah. So it's all about outcome. It's like simple introduction you to this theory of change in order to give you based on the examples further next slides to understanding how it could be practitioner on the level of microfinance institution. Thank you.
Yes, and I think it's also important to say that if we look at impact, and I think let's really look at a clear example to one of the core SDGs we have in microfinance and in social impact, SDG 1, impact happens at different levels. And that also means that we can and have to measure it at different levels. And it's very important to say that if you start with the SDGs, don't be afraid of the high level indicators that you might not be able to measure right now. I think what's important is really to understand that how does that chain, and we also call it the impact pathway, what has to happen so that we can really say that impact happens, that poverty is reduced. Yeah, and so it's not only about the what we do, so that we provide financial products which are targeted at excluded and underserved groups, or also not only the products themselves, it's also about the non-financial services that we provide, for example, the literacy trainings. And when we see with respect to SDG 1, for example, if we go to that second level of output, what are the direct results that we are doing? So this is still not the measures that we want to really see, like at the outcome level, to really see what is the impact at the client level, but we can measure already some of the existing indicators that we have. So for example, and we've seen that also in Maria's presentation, to start with the indicators and the social indicators that are already there. So look at the underserved clients and the target groups that you have reached, for example, with indicators of how many rural clients have you reached, how many first-time borrowers, or maybe also break it down by the minority groups, or also the people at risk of poverty or the people below the poverty line, if that's the target group you want to actually reach. Yeah, so at that output level, yeah, so we do already have indicators, and in order to link that to the correct SDGs, it's really important to say that you can really start from there, and also to really measure what is the adequate type and quality of the products and services you provide. like the typical measures are also like the average loan size, the outstanding loans by the type of client, and also the different types of, let's say, customers that you target. So if we are still at that output level, yeah, that's still an important, let's say, starting point, and really start with the ones that you have, link it to the SDG, and then really advance over time if the outcome level is still too, let's say, yeah, difficult, or also maybe too time consuming for you. But at the same time, we should also be aware that what we are about to measure is really if we really achieve impact at a level of the clients, and at a level which is really also a longer term impact, which we see in the lives of people. And this really touches on a lot of aspects, like, did people really increase or diversify their income? Yeah, did they move out of poverty? Did they spend more on basic needs because they increased household assets, yeah, or they could do household improvements? Or also that question on financial resilience. If you look in those targets of the SDG number 1, you will find that this is really one of a target that's also measured. So this is really something, if we can find some indicators there, although it might be important and also difficult from the very beginning, it's really important to move there. Yeah, and again, it's also, and I think that's an important example for also SDG number 8, if we do the same principle for the, let's say, decent work and also the decent jobs that we want to promote, it's good to start with the input and also with the output levels of how many micro entrepreneurs have we reached, or how did our service and products really match the needs. But if you look at the outcome level, there are several levels that we can actually see how new businesses were really created, and also to measure those, and also to see how income has changed, although this is really difficult. But I would also like to recall that sometimes we only calculate and count and measure maybe the jobs, but it's also on that definition of decent work. So maybe do not forget that if jobs are created, that this also involves adequate structures, so that we look at about human rights, that we look about labor rights, and that we also look that all groups are let's say included in that sense, that we also create decent work for all, and that anti-discrimination and other important factors are also safeguarded. But you see, it's really a pathway, and that also means if we measure it at different levels, if you start with easier indicators, it's good, and you can advance over time and still match some of the indicators that you already have to those missions. And I think what's also important to mention is that, since we are talking also about European MFIs here, we looked at the recent report from the Corporation and the Microfinance in Europe, and the state of the microfinance report. And what we see is that if you look at their primary goals, which is really about increasing access to financial services, about really promoting existing and also new businesses, and including people that are otherwise not included in the market. If we really look at those social goals, yeah, we can also see that it's quite easy also to link them to the specific SDGs. And that's maybe also an important exercise that you can take at the beginning. If you look at the goals you have, also look at the strategic goals that are actually already defined by some of the existing impact measurement frameworks, like the IRIS Plus framework that I'm going to present later. And we've mentioned it, and I've showed some of the, let's say, links already for SDG 1 and 3. You will see that most of those targets and goals that you have are actually really covered by the SDGs. So the step to measuring what you do, and also to find the indicators and the key metrics and KPIs, is really not too difficult. Yeah, and if you want to start also from the point of, if you want to start a system, like if you see the IRIS Plus system, which was developed by the Global Impact Investing Network, for example, if you see what are the goals and what are the social goals that you already pursue, like improving access to finance, yeah, this will already show you the SDGs and the most direct link that you have. So if you are still unsure and you want to do it in a relevant and a professional way, so use those sources from the impact management platform, or also use an SDG rating and really start and get help and also align this to what's already in the market. And sorry, let me go back. And also, like, if you have the goal of supporting decent jobs and fostering economic development, you can also see that this can be linked to SDG number 8 and 10, and you can also deduct some of the metrics there. Yes, so I think that's important, and also to find the right metrics. We covered some of the aspects already, but it's really important to note, although it sometimes seems that many of the indicators and metrics are really different for whomever looks at the SDGs, actually there are some harmonized standards that we see at the moment. And for example, one of this is the IRIS Plus system that I was mentioning. And what a lot of people don't know is actually that many of the indicators that we also use in different sectors, they are actually also derived from that sectors. So for example, at the moment, there are more than 30,000 subscribers to this IRIS Plus framework. And it also has a subsegment for the financial inclusion sector. And we see that, for example, on the right side, also for specific sectors, like which are always recurring for gender, for also for jobs, yeah? So we also see that, especially if you work with DFIs or international lenders, there are also harmonized indicators already, which are also a little bit harmonized with the IRIS Plus framework. Yes, so depending on the partners that you usually work with, and maybe you also start reporting on the SDGs because you start working with a specific lender or an investor. So this is really some of the sets of indicators that you can really turn to, and then you can also start from there. But also for our specific sector, it's really worth mentioning that there is a lot of work that has been done before. And for example, with the Atlas database, or also with SPTF and the microfinance networks, we really do see that, especially on the outcome level, but also on the output level, common metrics and indicators have derived. And I think it's also important to say that, for example, in our rating tool, which is designed specifically for the microfinance sectors, we do include many indicators which are actually like common sense indicators from our sector, and they can be linked to the SDGs. And for example, on the right side, I also showed an example from the Microfinance rating, which is actually the indicators also that we've seen on the impact pathway, and where you can really start on a few that you already measure, and then you can evolve and you can also advance over time in measuring more and really getting to the outcome level. And there's a progress, let's say there's also a kind of harmonization progress ongoing now to come up with a standard set for outcome indicators for the sector. We are not there yet, yeah, but still you see that as a sector themselves, are also what we saw from the Romanian microfinance institution. It's clear that there need to be some harmonization, because otherwise the overload, especially for small organizations, will really be hard. Yeah, and since you will get those slides, I'll only touch on it very quickly. If we have some social enterprises here, which are not part of the microfinance sector, there's also a new framework which has been developed by the UN. It's called the Sustainable Development Performance Indicators. And they also give very concrete guidance if you are a social business on how to include the SDGs. And it also gives concrete indicators which are also really, really fit for small and especially enterprises in the social sectors. So I found this important to mention. So you might want to check it out if you are not from the microfinance sector. And also, I think it's important to say, from the European Code of Conduct for Microcredit Provision, many of the indicators we see here, we can link them to the SDGs, especially to the output level. And so it's nothing new that you have to report, but really to understand the pathway. And I think most of those indicators, they have already been mentioned. Yeah. To have a look at one of the SDGs that can really also create some of the main impact pathways that a lot of European MFIs are really also contributing to. This is actually about promoting decent jobs. not only in general, but especially for certain minority groups, also in rural regions. And I think it's important to state that usually this is an indicator that's not so easy to measure. But for example, if you look at the output level, yes, so if you see in order to really promote job creation, you can really also see the number of active clients that you serve and also the number of SMEs that you have, the average loan size, or also the number of trainings and also the financial and business, let's say, development trainings that you provide. Yes, so this can be really a starting point, also broken down maybe by the sector that the SMEs are in, or maybe also the size of the business to really see how this has taken place. And only as the next step, if we come to the outcome indicators, let's look at the existing indicators that are really like the market standard. And it's, for example, also the jobs which are directly maintained and created. This is one of the main indicators now in most of the frameworks, but also the number of jobs sustained, or maybe also if you are an investor, like the indirect jobs you created at SMEs, which are financed within its financial institution. So this is something, this is really pretty much harmonized at the moment. And if this is maybe a little bit a step of too far for you, so you can also start that you do not really measure the job creation at the individual company level, but that you really start looking at what is like the average number of employees in a typical business that you are serving. Yes, so this is also an outcome indicator, but which is maybe a little bit easier to start with. So if some of the standardized indicators are too difficult for you, turn to those easier ones. But let's not forget to really mention the level that you really look at. And to give you an example also, so if you provide a loan to a small or medium-sized enterprise, and there were like 8 employees at the beginning, and at the end of the loan or at the end of the reporting period, there were like 13 employees. So the jobs created were 5. Yeah, the jobs maintained still are 8. So what would be the impact in terms of the jobs that have been directly supported? It's 13. Yeah, and this is a kind of approach and also a definition that's more and more adopted by the sector and also by international, let's say, yeah, investors and lenders, because this is really like an indicator that is used really, let's say, in a harmonized way also to really measure how job creation as an important driver for economic growth is really looked at, so that not each and everybody has their own indicators. Yeah, and to really sum it up also, measuring the real life impact in your real life, especially for a small organization, is a complex task. And it's not only about choosing the right framework or about the right metrics, because data alone will not save the world. Yeah, it's really about looking at the pathway, looking at what you measure already, and try to link it professionally and to the relevant SDG targets by mentioning also the level that you measure. You can do that and you can advance over time. And still, and that's what I would like to mention, of course, we are talking and we are trying also to present some of the harmonized sources here, but it's also important to say that still, if you work with specific investors or lenders, they might have their own specific frameworks or indicators, although the harmonization process is ongoing. Yeah. So in the appendix and also in the references, you will see quite some other frameworks, but I think it's also important to mention maybe, and if you would like to really have a look at the next poll again, so I'm pretty sure that you already use some of the indicators that can be linked to the SDGs. So maybe if you would like, and let's open the next poll to really see if you, for example, already do report according to the European Code of Conduct, or if you work with international donors or indicators, also according to Atlas database or the SBTF. Let's really also have a look if you do that, or even if you maybe already use some of the really advanced employment and business related indicators. So let's look at the examples. Yeah. And you do see that we see a couple of organizations that really start with some of them. Yeah. And I think it's important to see that if you already start with those, you are able to also refer to the SDGs. Yeah, and it's really important to maybe extend this over time, but also to start from what you have and not to really think the SDGs are something completely new, which completely overhaul your impact measurement framework. So, and I would say it's really nice to also see really a bigger organization which have their own impact measurement framework. So Laura, thanks a lot also for sharing your experience on how you included, let's say, the SDGs, especially also with the view of your, let's say, strategic pillars and also the impact themes you have.
Thank you, and thank you, Maria, for sharing the presentation. In order to understand why and how we are doing this, I think it's a little bit important to see who exactly we are and why we are doing this. And if we go to the first slide, this one, we will see that it's in our mission to create social impact. Social impact is our purpose of existence. Let's put it like this. We are part of two financial groups which actually blend together, part of the BCR. BCR stands for Romanian Commercial Bank, which is the second largest bank in Romania. And we are also part of the Erste Group, which is one of the largest financial groups in Central and Eastern Europe. And we are organized as a non-banking financial institution, meaning according to the Romanian legislation that we are allowed to finance, but we are not allowed to take deposits and to open accounts. This is something that mostly a bank could do or other institutions could do, but we finance not just for the sake of financing. We want to create impact. So as we go through the presentation, I will let you show some of our results and how we are going there. But you need to know that it was the expression of the willingness, the decision of our shareholders to put in our constitutive act as such, although they didn't have to, that no dividends will be distributed, and all the profit of the company forever will be reinvested in order to achieve the social impact and the social goals of the company. Although not registered as such, we do also act like a social enterprise ourselves. And if we go to the next slide, this is like we have a large experience over 13 years as such. If we talk also about the outreach and the outcomes, more than 4,500 active clients, and the portfolio actually increased up to 40 million euro. Over half of our portfolio is concentrated into agro and rural areas. And in terms of the client types, we do finance SMEs. That is for the 44% that you see there, which is in Romanian the acronym there, and the agricultural producers, which is 34%. In terms of size, we are something like 110 employees and 25 branches covering the country. We finance only in Romania. And if we go to the next slide, we started initially with the problems that we identified, and which are classic for microfinance. It's limited and no access to financing and high unemployment rating in the rural areas. And we developed products and interventions that in the end we were hoping that would create and preserve jobs in the rural areas. This is what we were aiming at, and we will see how we managed to do that in the following slides. This slide is seems very vivid and complicated, but in fact, what we were trying here is to map the SDGs, the financing that we were granting the social enterprises and the NGOs into the SDGs that we were talking before. We added social enterprises and NGOs into our target clients in the middle of the or the outburst of the pandemic in 2020. So we wanted to see how we were doing and where is our intervention going. And if you look into just into the big numbers, most of our intervention is within education and no poverty, but we are also targeting health and all the other SDGs. What you see here are the organizations that we financed over the last 2.5 years since we started and did this intervention. If we go to the next slide. We recently, and with the help of, we need to acknowledge this, with the help of the European Investment Fund guarantee for the skills and education, we were able to introduce loans for education. Since 2022 marks the European Year of Youth, we launched product dedicated to students, financing their tuition fees, living costs, rent, other need for materials and equipment, and to help them enroll in a university and finish their studies without having the concern of all these expenses. And adding some interesting features to our product that make it interesting and also affordable for the clients. The data that you're seeing there regarding the what we managed to finance are already old. And starting this year, we see a constant increase. We almost tripled the intervention as we speak. So we see a constant interest for this product. If we go to the next slide, it is we are talking about the if we want to talk about how do we measure our impact. Of course, we have the outreach, the outcomes, results that we can get out of the system, and this is very nice. But we need to see how we are doing in real life and with our clients. And every 2 years, we run an impact questionnaire, impact survey with a part of our portfolio. Actually, it is implemented throughout the group, and it's part of the results are part of the impact communication of the social banking division of the Erste Group. And we conduct these interviews. We have a set of questions that look not only on, of course, as I told you, the data we can get out of the system, but we want to know how our clients, appreciate or don't appreciate the results of our financing and our intervention, and the loan that they were taking with us. Is it helping them? Is it building up their business? How do they feel in real life what is happening? Because Maria mentioned before that the fintechs can have easier access to the databases, and they can get all this data. It is not only the access. Access is not such a difficult thing. It is the type also of the clients that you are assessing. Do they have this data available? Do they report this data? Can you get this data from the existing databases? So as we are financing vulnerable clients, it turns out that not all of them report on their assets or have the obligation to report on their assets or on their turnover or on the number of employees. Agricultural producers, for example, do not do that. Individual entrepreneurs do not report on their assets. How do we assess that? So this is a tricky and difficult question for us if we want to implement all these all these reporting requirements, and I think that we will be able to find a solution for all of the MFIs, because we will discuss together within the Romania Microfinance Association to see how we can help each other find, if somebody found a solution, why not share it in order to make it easier for all of us. If we go
find a
further,
solution, Laura? Did you find a solution? Did you, BCR?
Yeah, it is for the moment we are using this impact survey, and you are seeing some of the results run right now. It is the we cannot go through all the clients with the survey. It will take too long, so this is why we are choosing a sample for the clients. And it is based also on their feelings. And we plan to implement something else, because we are going to somehow assess the clients regularly and input into the database the results on their business as they report it to us, if not to the official reporting, through their official reporting documents, because they might not be a request. And we'll be able to see their progress in time for that. We plan to do this at the middle of the loan and then at the end of the loan. We haven't done this until now, but we are in the process of updating our MIS to be able to also capture this data, because the MIS is able to capture the data from the official database, Ministry of Finance, or whatever other authorities that capture this official data. But for the others, as I mentioned, there is no data available, and this is difficult from the beginning when you assess them. So for the time being, we were using the questionnaire, and for this year, we will also use the questionnaire. We hope to have the results available by the end of the year. We are in the process of refining the survey, the questionnaire. So this is a sample of the data that we reported on the, it is the outreach and also some qualitative data, as we call it. Like you see here that 45% of the clients that responded mentioned that they could not start or grow, could only start or grow only due to microfinance because they did not have anything else available. 94%, we also checked on this. Was it okay for you to go into this business? Do you feel like it was a good decision? And 94% seem to be happy with their decision to start a business. 57% assessed that they are in a better economic situation. As you can see about the turnover, 50% declared that they increased their turnover. This is not checked through the databases. This is checked through the survey. So just to have an idea of what we are looking into. We assessed that in during the 13 years of our existence, we managed through our finance to preserve these numbers, big numbers of jobs, and to create these jobs. So this was based on previous questionnaires answers, and through a methodology that was developed together with our colleagues from Vienna, and assessed that according every loan finance based on the previous answers help to sustain or to create a certain multiplier of jobs. So this is how we are doing, and if you would like to see the impact of the entire group, the social banking, these are the results from our financing as of 2021, actually. So 2022 will be available at the end of the year, or probably first quarter in 2024. Because we are, as I mentioned, in the process of revisiting the questions and to have them more adapted to what we actually want to capture. for the time being.
Thanks a lot, Laura. And I was also appreciating that you shared one of the most critical points also, which is about the data quality and what we can actually get from the clients that we typically serve, especially in a way that we know that it's not the typical corporate client that we know from maybe other big organizations and financial institutions that might find it a little bit easier also to comply with regulation because they do have the data already. But I do really see that also in terms of the, let's say, pathway that you did, that you also still say that you do the biannual or also like every second year a survey, and you also assist us with the other data that you receive from your own MIS and also from the ones that you collect at different levels. And that like the last mile, the outcome level is, even for you as an organization, it's really difficult to measure, and not only about the correct framework, but also about what we actually can get. Yes, so thanks a lot for sharing. And
thank you.
We would really like to encourage you and not to frustrate you, to start simple, to start with the indicators you have and really to advance over time, and also to really see maybe the potential that you still have in terms of the impact measurement, because we do see if we really want to serve the clients better, we also have to keep ourselves more accountable to professional standards, and also maybe go that last mile and really measuring and really verifying if we truly have the impact we make. So thanks a lot for your participation. I would really like to see if we still have a question or a comment, and then I can only thank also Microfinance Center and also the two participants for sharing, for supporting, and also the people behind the scenes, also the technical support. So thanks everybody for your participation and also for your attention in this webinar. Thanks a lot.
Maria, did you want to comment anything?
It was for us. It's really important to share with MFC and with the other country association our experience, and we like very much this opportunity and this forum you create in order to exchange information and best practices. Yeah.
I actually have one question to Laura and to Maria. How does your framework, which is quite robust, and really driven by this multi-perspective and social goals and many target groups of clients, how does it feed into the work that you are trying to do, just as association, just what, which parts are retained, just which parts are kind of shared with others, just maybe even reinforced by other institutions. How does this process, what does it look like?
I'll try to answer with the feedback or with the feedback I got during the workshop we ran in December. So I think it's a common feeling that reporting and assessing the impact and this multitude of key performance indicators and this approach will complicate the reporting. And they start in order to have this change, in order to engage them in this change, you have to show them the end results and the benefit of engaging in this transformation, which is time-consuming, costly, needs a lot of efforts from the microfinance institution, and showing them best practices like BCR, or we have another example from Patria Credit. Show them the end, yes, how those reports are used, how they are used as tools to better manage the impact of their activities, how they are used to promote the institutions, how they are used in order to get less costly finance, all those kind of things. Yes. So and having the end result of these efforts make it for them easier. So at least this was.
I think this is what I was aiming at, because I guess not everyone is at the same level as BCR or Patria Credit, but it's great that you have those great examples. But if not, then I think this more kind of organic work that Manuela suggested of just focusing on the goals of the institutions, and most of the MFIs have the social goals, but also on what you do, the target clients, and trying to focus your work on that, and then maybe link with the first SDG, or maybe see the relevance of others would be at this stage sufficient. So I think you are guys very lucky in Romania, but in the countries where you are alone, there's one institution or two. I think the whole purpose of this exercise is to encourage you to look at, if you haven't been already doing this as part of SPTF, social performance, which is also, we've also together done a lot of work on that, on identifying those social performance indicators in the past. I think there are things that you can build on, and then eventually try to create those links with SDGs, as Manuela and Andriy have suggested this. So I think I don't see any questions. I would like to acknowledge one introduction from Senegal. It's great also to have that we have people from other regions. Welcome. I would like to say thank you to all of you, to Agents for Impact, Manuela and Andriy, and to Maria and Laura, especially for stepping in at the very last minute for that. I think it's been a very fruitful and interesting webinar. And yes, as we already mentioned so many times, we will share the presentations. It's such an interesting and exciting subject topic, especially for microfinance, which actually has a lot to offer. It's enough to look at those achievements of BCR to see, how socially powered we are. So it's just question of translating that into some of those indicators and benchmarks that we can proudly produce, just to the public and to policymakers, to anyone, frankly, to see that we doing a pretty good job here. So I think it's worth paying more attention to, and I hope if inquiries appear and more questions, and there will be more developments on the regulation side, and your interest in the topic, I'm sure we'll be happy to offer more on this subject. So with this, I would like to thank you, all of you, for your participation, and see you soon, hopefully in Budva or at any other webinar. Joanna, would you like to maybe make some last second announcements as well?
I just would like to add that when you leave the meeting, you find in your browser the evaluation form.
Okay.
And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Take care. Goodbye. Bye.
Thank you. Have a nice day and a nice week. All the best.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.